8 months. That is how long Caitlin Clark was away from competitive basketball at the highest level. 8 months of silence, 8 months of questions, 8 months of critics waiting for the moment she came back and looked human, rusty, overrated, a product of hype finally exposed under real international pressure. And what did she do the first time she stepped back onto that international stage? She won MVP of the entire group stage, not a participation trophy, not a sentiment award, the most valuable player of the tournament, backed by the numbers, backed by the eye test, and backed by the results. Let that land for a second. But here is what most channels are completely missing. Yes, the MVP is the headline. Yes, Clark returning sharper and more confident after nearly a year away is remarkable on its own, but buried inside the story of Team USA's dominance is a crack, a real one. It showed up on tape during the Spain game. And if you watched closely, many of you did, because you have been paying attention, you already know what we are about to unpack. There is a pairing on this roster that simply does not work, and until it gets addressed, it represents the one structural fault line in what is otherwise the most dangerous women's basketball team on the planet. We are going to break all of it down today. If this kind of analysis is what keeps you coming back, hit that like button right now. It tells us the investigation matters, and it keeps this channel in the fight for the stories nobody else is covering properly. Let us set the scene, because context is everything here. Team USA entered this tournament as overwhelming favorites. That is nothing new. USA women's basketball has been the dominant force in international competition for decades. Multiple Olympic gold medals, multiple world championship titles. A tradition of winning so consistent that blowout victories have almost become the expectation. But dominant does not mean invincible. And complacency has a way of collecting its tax, eventually, even from the most legendary programs in sports history. Spain arrived already without one of their most important contributors. Maria Cañadas was held out of the lineup entirely, a significant piece resting on the bench. And even then, Spain still made Team USA earn every single possession from the opening tip to the final buzzer. Consider what that actually means. A deeper rotation, a key player deliberately rested, and they still manufactured a real, competitive, grinding basketball game against one of the most talented rosters ever assembled. Spain rotated more players throughout the night than the Americans did. That is a statement about their depth and their belief in their own system. The prediction before tip-off was blowout. Spain by 50, some analysts were saying not 50 points total, 50 points of margin. Those takes were not just wrong, they were embarrassing. What actually played out was a legitimate battle where both teams fought hard for every bucket. And that competitive resistance from Spain is precisely what made Clark's individual performance so analytically revealing. Here is why that matters. When you cannot run a clean or open offense, when every possession requires adjustment, every read requires patience, every decision requires processing at full game speed under active defensive pressure, that is when real playmakers separate from everyone else. Easy wins tell you what players can do when conditions are favorable. Contested, gritty wins tell you who those players actually are when the margin for error disappears. Caitlin Clark answered that question with absolute clarity. Her shooting was off. It may have been her worst night from the field across the entire tournament. Every scorer goes through this. The ball refuses to cooperate. The rhythm is slightly out of sync. The touch is not there. Even the greatest shooters in basketball history have nights where the basket feels like it physically shrinks. That is not an indictment. That is basketball. The weather report, the off night, the night every elite player has eventually. What separates the exceptional from the merely good is what they do when the shooting is not working. The lesser player disappears, forces bad looks, gets frustrated, and starts hunting their shot instead of playing the game. Clark did none of that. She found every other available way to affect the outcome. Defensively, this may have been her best performance of the entire tournament run, active positioning on every rotation, engaged communication with teammates. Visible, deliberate effort on the defensive side of the floor on play after play. That is not the Caitlin Clark that lazy takes like to describe. That was a locked-in competitor fighting through adversity by expanding her contributions beyond scoring. Her playmaking kept the entire Team USA offensive system functional against a Spain defense specifically designed to disrupt her rhythm and take away her primary options. When teams do that, when they eliminate your standard sets and force improvisation, you either break down or you elevate your basketball IQ in real time. Clark chose elevation, finding angles before they closed, moving the ball ahead of the pressure, creating advantages 3 passes ahead of where the defense was focused. That invisible work does not always appear in the box score. It absolutely appears in winning. Derek Hamby was essential in ways the casual viewer might not fully appreciate, running the floor in transition, finishing around the rim, winning the physical battles for loose balls and tough rebounds that keep an offense breathing. The kind of contribution coaches value enormously and highlight reels ignore completely. That work is load-bearing for a team's success, even when it generates zero attention. Kelsey, Plum, and Kahleah were the offensive fireworks. When those two got going, the whole energy of the game shifted. The aggression, the confidence, the full-speed attacks on the basket, that is, elite production at the right moments. But here is something critical to understand. Those big performances did not happen in a vacuum. They were structurally created. When Clark runs the offense, defenses face an impossible decision on every single possession: press her full court. She thrives in open court with the ball and the vision to punish that aggressiveness. Trap her at half court. Her passing reads are fast enough to exploit that coverage with one clean touch. Back off. She launches from the logo without hesitation. There is no good answer. That decision paralysis is manufactured, and it is intentional, and it creates the open windows that Plum and Copper walked straight through all night long. Their production was directly connected to Clark's gravitational effect on opposing defenses. Now, the MVP case. Because this is where the math becomes airtight, Paige Bueckers had genuinely good moments throughout this tournament: polished guard play, controlled tempo, clear flashes of why she is regarded as one of the most technically skilled young players in the sport. But when you examine the full statistical picture across all 5 games, not individual standout moments, but accumulated production, she was not top 3 in scoring, and she was not top 3 in assists. The consistency required to win this award was not present at the same level. Kahleah is electric when fully engaged. Few players anywhere in the sport are more explosive attacking the paint at full speed. But across the group stage, there were quiet games, stretches where the production simply was not there. In a tournament-wide MVP conversation, inconsistency is disqualifying. Flashes of brilliance surrounded by periods of absence do not build a winning argument. Clark led Team USA in total points across the tournament, led in assists per game. Her plus-minus numbers ranked among the best on the entire roster throughout the run. She produced in her best games and found ways to contribute meaningfully in her worst. When the panel sat down to make their decision, the case was straightforward. Most points, most assists, highest sustained impact over 5 games. The numbers lined up, the eye test lined up, the results lined up. Some awards sparked debate. This one did not. And that is because the case was built on accumulation over an entire tournament, not on a single spectacular night. Now here is where we shift gears, because the MVP story is important. But the hidden problem story is what this channel lives for. And it is the angle that every other recap video is either ignoring completely or glossing over with one throwaway sentence. There is a chemistry problem on this Team USA roster. Let us be precise about that. It is not manufactured drama. It is not a hot take. It is not a narrative invented to generate clicks. It showed up on the court, in real time, visible to anyone who was watching the game with attention rather than just waiting for highlight clips. Multiple independent observers noticed the same thing. Caitlin Clark and Chelsea Gray on the floor at the same time does not work. Drop your read on this in the comments right now. Did you notice the Clark-Gray pairing issue during the Spain game? We want to know what you actually saw in real time, because the more perspectives we collect on this, the clearer the tactical picture becomes. This is not about either player's individual quality. Let us be precise about that too. Kelsey Gray is an elite point guard, a veteran with championship experience, high basketball IQ, and exactly the kind of professional presence a national team program values in its locker room. Caitlin Clark is by most measurements the most impactful offensive player in women's basketball right now. Put them on a list of the best players in the sport, and both names belong there without argument. But when they share the floor simultaneously, the rhythm disappears. The ball movement slows, the spacing gets congested. Two players whose optimal effectiveness requires the ball in their hands and open space around them end up competing for the same real estate at the same time. It is not a personality conflict. It is not effort. It is structural. It is two playing styles that simply do not complement each other at the most fundamental level of spacing and ball movement. Sometimes that happens with genuinely great players. It does not diminish either of them. It just means the pairing does not work tactically, and this is where the coaching staff faces a real decision going forward. In the group stage, Team USA was winning by enormous margins, averaging around 40 points of separation in some games. When the score is that lopsided, lineup inefficiencies can be absorbed without consequence. A clunky possession here, a broken play there. It gets lost in the flood, but the further this team advances, the more competitive the games will become. The margin for error shrinks. Spain, missing a key player, still made USA grind for an entire game. That was not an anomaly. That was a preview of what is coming. If Team USA faces a top European program, teams that have spent years studying American tendencies and preparing specific tactical responses, the difference between a winning possession and a careless turnover can determine the entire outcome. At that level, lineup chemistry is not a talking point. It is a competitive advantage or a competitive liability. And right now, that Clark-Gray pairing is the latter. The coaching staff has the film. The players know. Elite competitors can feel when something is flowing and when something is congested. The question now is not whether the problem exists. The question is whether the correction happens before it costs something significant on the scoreboard, real quick. If the analysis you get here is keeping you a step ahead of the mainstream coverage, consider supporting this channel by hitting that join button below. Every member directly enables us to keep digging into the stories that actually matter. Let us zoom out now, because Clark's MVP performance does not exist in isolation. It sits inside a much larger narrative that has been building since the day she entered the WNBA and immediately changed how millions of people consume women's basketball. She was away from competitive play for approximately 8 months. That is a meaningful duration. Rhythm, timing, the instinctive processing speed required for elite basketball, all of those things require active maintenance. Players who step away from competition at the highest level and return rusty are not rare. They are the norm. That is the expected trajectory. What happened instead was a physical transformation that caught people genuinely off guard. Clark came back leaner, quicker in her movements, more explosive in her first step. Multiple observers watching the tournament noted that she appeared physically different from the player who stepped away last season. Tighter build, faster transitions, more natural fluidity in her movement patterns. And that physical change appears to fit her style of play more precisely. The fast twitch quickness she relies on to create separation. The burst she needs to get into her pull-up before the defender recovers. The ability to change direction without losing speed. All of it looked more fluid, more effortless, more dangerous than before. 8 months away, and she returned in better physical condition than when she left. Not maintaining what she had, actually improving it. That sequence of facts tells you something important about how this player approaches her craft when nobody is watching, when there is no game on the schedule, when the cameras are pointed elsewhere and the off-season could easily become rest. She made it work instead. That physical foundation matters enormously for what is coming. The WNBA season is on the horizon. The Indiana Fever are building their entire competitive identity around her presence. The expectations on that franchise are enormous, and this tournament performance just added more weight to those expectations from every direction. Every coaching staff around the league is studying this film right now. Every defensive coordinator is drawing up their Clark coverage strategy. Every opposing player is watching her movement patterns, trying to identify any weakness before the regular season tips off. What they found in this tournament footage is a player who used the offseason to address her weaknesses rather than ignore them. The defensive engagement, the physical conditioning, the ability to return after 8 months and immediately process the speed of international basketball, reading coverages, making adjustments, finding angles, at the exact pace required. That does not happen by accident. Is Caitlin Clark the single best basketball player in the world at this moment? That is a genuinely complex conversation. A'ja Wilson has one of the most airtight arguments for that title in the entire sport. The size advantage, the scoring versatility from multiple levels, the defensive presence that can alter possessions without even blocking shots. Wilson is a generational talent performing at her absolute peak right now. And there are other players at different positions whose impact is harder to quantify in direct statistical comparison with Clark. But among guards, from an entertainment standpoint, from a pure impact standpoint, from a commercial and cultural standpoint, Clark sits at the very top. And that combination of factors matters. Sports at the highest level are also a performance art. The logo threes, the no-look passes that thread through defenders before anyone in the building sees the window. The moments where a possession that looked dead suddenly becomes something that makes you stop, rewind, and watch again. Those are the plays that build audiences. Those are the plays that make people who had never watched women's basketball care about women's basketball. The WNBA's growth trajectory over the past 2 years has Clark's fingerprints directly on it. Television ratings climbing, ticket demand rising, merchandise moving, social media engagement, reaching audiences that were never part of the conversation before. None of that is coincidence. It is the direct, measurable output of a player who makes people need to watch. An MVP performance on the international stage after 8 months away from competition is simply another data point in a story that is building towards something genuinely historic. If you want to stay inside this story as it develops, the Fever season preparation, the international tournament outcomes, the deeper picture of where Clark's career is heading, and what this version of her means for the league. Subscribe right now and turn on notifications. Hit that bell. What we watched in this tournament is a preview. The full picture is still being painted. Here is the angle that deserves the final word, because nobody else is framing it this way. Clark did not just win an MVP, she absorbed 8 months away from the game, came back physically improved, delivered her best defensive performance of the tournament in her worst shooting game, and walked away with hardware that validated everything she had built. That specific sequence, break, improve, or return, dominate, is not normal. Most players fight to recapture what they had before. Clark walked away and came back with something new, something more complete, something that has not fully been unleashed yet. The rest of the league spent months preparing for the Caitlin Clark from last season. What they are going to get in the Fever season is someone different, someone who addressed the critiques during the silence, when nobody could verify the work was happening. Someone who came back leaner, faster, and more engaged on both ends of the floor. Whatever comes next, the tournament knockout rounds, the Fever season, the CBA negotiations that shape what this league looks like for the next decade. This MVP moment represents a floor, not a ceiling. And the teams trying to plan around her need to understand that distinction clearly. The next video breaks down what this tournament performance signals for Clark's upcoming Fever season and what opposing head coaches will specifically be game planning in response. You are going to want to see that one. Stay locked in.